Oh, hey there. It's time for another episode of the Site Crafting Podcast, a podcast by Site Crafting, but it's not about site crafting, it's about community. I'm your host, Jen Rittenhouse, Director of Brand and Marketing around here. Today, I am talking to the Executive Director of the Pierce County Library System, Gretchen Casarati. I'm so excited to spend time with Gretchen. She's somebody who I really enjoy knowing, and I think you should know her too. Gretchen and I first met during a 1-year leadership program. And the first thing I noticed about Gretchen was her approachability, her leaderly presence. And as a person, she is so smart and just down to the ground. But before we get started, I just want to thank you for listening, watching, spending time with us. We don't know what we're doing with this podcast, but we do know what we want to do. And that is shine a spotlight on people in our community who are doing really important work and great things that make the South Puget Sound such a wonderful place to be. So thank you so much. And here we go, Gretchen Casarati. Hello, Gretchen.
Hello, Jen.
How are you?
I'm doing great today.
Good, good. Thank you so much for being on the Site Crafting Podcast, a podcast by Site Crafting. This is the thing we're trying. We don't know what we're doing, but we know what we're trying to do. And that is shine a spotlight on folks in the community who are doing important work. So you came to mind. But before we jump into all of that, we ask everyone on our podcast about their experience with the internet because we are nothing if not a tech company first, and the internet is a big part of our story. We wouldn't exist without it. So, when did you first get on the internet and what was your experience like?
I had to really reach back into memory to be able to answer this question, actually. And I traced it back to the first year I went to college, right out of high school. We had a computer lab and used email. And some of my friends at that school in 1990 chose to study computer science. And we all thought they were crazy. And they are very successful and have had successful careers as early adopters of computer technology. But I didn't do anything with it. I actually traced my school and traveling and moving experiences. And it wasn't until 2003 that I actually got my first laptop computer because I was going back to college, fill in the gaps there of the journey of an adolescent finding adulthood. I got a laptop when I decided to go back to college and finish my bachelor's degree. And I had an AOL disk for a dial-up modem. And I remember at that time using AOL for chat and email in my tiny New York City apartment as an investment for me to go back to college and have a tool. Picture it. Plain as day. It was the Mac iBook, the cheap version, and a little white box.
As seen on Sex and the City when Carrie Bradshaw's doing all of her journaling.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so in those early days of the internet, we were all still trying to be anonymous. Did you have a username that was anonymous that you remember or would be willing to share?
I really don't remember. I really can't find it in my memory bank. I have always used like a nickname for my generic internet use, but I don't recall that I would have done it that early. I'm pretty boring. I usually use my name for a lot of stuff. So I really can't, I have no idea what my AOL name was.
That's fair. That's totally fair. Awesome.
I also remember a friend of mine from acting school in Los Angeles met somebody in a chat room and moved to Indiana and married that person and had a family and life. And she was an early adopter of the virtual dating world.
Isn't that wild to think about? We were all in chat rooms talking to strangers, especially now in the era. We both have teenagers. And so in the era of like trying to teach responsible internet use, but also simultaneously protect our children,
Mm-hmm.
not talking to strangers is like rule number one. But in the early days of the internet, we were talking to all the strangers.
Yep. Yes.
That is wild to think about. Oh my goodness. Well, you and I first met in a leadership program. And one of the things that I learned about you was you didn't start out, you now lead the Pierce County Library System, but you didn't start on a path that was directly pointed at library leadership.
Not at all.
So where did it all begin?
I studied acting. I was a child of the arts and pursued acting as a career, but not with much deep commitment because I found myself enjoying waiting tables more than auditioning. And I thought I should probably listen to that inner voice and explore that a little bit more. And the bridge came with that awareness that I was now an adult wanting stability. And I was wanting consistency and reliability in ways that I knew that profession wasn't going to be able to provide for me. And I found that something in me had always been a caregiver, a nurturer, a helper. I liked waiting tables. I liked caring for animals. I always had jobs caring for animals and children. I nannied when I lived in New York, and just kind of connected those dots with the fact that I had always been a reader and a library user. The click happened that I knew that being a children's librarian was the path for me. And so I went back to get my master's degree and became a children's librarian at New York Public Library, which was an amazing experience. Shortest a creative arts background, really, I don't know, advance leadership opportunities for me. And so I moved really quickly into management in my field and ultimately became a library director and worked in a few different states, and the growth opportunity for me to come to Pierce County and the opportunities for my family were just too great to pass up. And so we are all very, very glad that we are here.
That's fantastic. And how long have you been in Pierce County?
4 years. It's gone by so fast, but not a day goes by that we have any regrets. We moved here with no family, no connections. You know, it was on the tail of the pandemic. So it was also kind of wild moving, getting a job, and moving your life through FaceTime. Fortunate enough to be able to buy a house through FaceTime, which was unusual and not something I ever would like to do again.
Right. My gosh, if 2003 Gretchen knew with her white MacBook in New York that
Right?
techno what the internet and technology would do.
Hmm. Hmm.
So when we met, one of the things I noticed about you is I noticed a couple of things. You have like just such a strong leaderly presence, but you also see people and are also down to the ground. And I'm curious to know how time pursuing acting and also waiting tables has informed how you move through the world as a person, but then also as a leader.
Well, I can hands down say that acting in particular as an artistic form, similar to reading and exploring through literature, gives you a window of the incredible diversity of the human experience in ways like I've never seen anywhere else. The difference being in reading, you can imagine and experience someone else's life, but in acting, you have the opportunity to live it, to experience it. The full range of human emotion, the complexity of human beings psychologically and human behavior. So, being a lifelong reader and then studying theater has really given me a chance in the field of public libraries in particular, but all libraries broadly. They really are steeped in human experience and humanity, not just repositories for books, but rather every person who comes into a building that may ask a question or email a question or chat a question to a librarian is coming from a whole full life of experience, and we could never know. And so really it allows you to live in the moment. And really, as an actor, you have to fully see somebody reading micro expressions, body language, and really be able to respond to meet people where they are at. And so I'm really grateful that I had that depth of training and critical thinking about those experiences because they're very useful in my field and in life, just in general.
Mhm.
And I found that, I mean, the same thing with any service job. I mean, I had many service jobs for a very long time. I mean, I did not become a librarian until I was nearly 30. So I know what it's like to work 3 jobs and not have food because you're paying your rent so that you have a roof over your head. And so those experiences, I would say, keep me grounded in that I can never know the extent of what someone's experience is, but I can treat people with dignity and understand that and give them grace and hope that they would reciprocate and do the same for me.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and waiting tables, it's interesting too. I have waited tables and it's very similar to coming to a library and people sit down to order
Mhm.
something from you. You don't know, they've had a whole spectrum of experience, even in a day
Yep,
or in the hour leading up to what brought
absolutely.
them there.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. And that's a part of it too, I think. I didn't know it then, but that the connections between public libraries and hospitality are really significant, especially today with technology changing, people's reading habits, but that also post pandemic, people really are leaning into the experience economy. And hospitality means a lot to why people are going to go out of their way to drive somewhere because we live in Pierce County, which is a very geographically large place. So we are talking a lot about that and how lessons from hospitality could inform some of the work we're doing in the libraries.
Absolutely. I think a lot of industries could learn from the hospitality industry. What are some of the things that you're thinking about as it relates to hospitality and library experience?
Well, some of what we were just talking about, I think we want to lean into with our staff around welcoming and seeing people not in a transactional way. We're really proud of the relationships that staff have in the community. So I know that we have a great foundation that we're starting from. And so I think leaning into enhancing the relationships is the easiest place to start. The next piece is really looking at the physical space, the physical environment, and that's something we're actively working on right now with some long range capital planning. Takes a little bit more of an investment to how people feel in the space and how the space is designed. One of the classes I took in my graduate program was human centered design, and I had no idea how incredibly valuable that was going to be also working in libraries and thinking about service design through that human centered lens. So we're doing some staff development is in the works right now, especially for our supervisors and leaders. It hasn't launched yet, but we're really just kind of at the beginning of working with and getting staff input on what does that look like to make the experience of coming to the library transformative for people.
So take me to the beginning of your career in libraries and talk to me about when you were a children's librarian.
Is the best. It was a Carnegie building and we worked in what were called clusters. So we actually worked in multiple branches, but you had a home, one that you was your regular spot. And that was great because I got to learn from a lot of other people in doing the work. So I started as a trainee because I was still in grad school. And part of that experience was sold to us as you're going to train under a professional children's librarian as a trainee. And then when you graduate from the program and get your degree, then you become a children's librarian somewhere in the system. So I showed up for my first day on the job at the branch, and my supervisor is giving me the tour of the building. It was a Carnegie 4 stories. The top floor actually was the old janitor's apartment and not open and full of pigeon poop and not great. And we were on the second floor, which was the children's library. And as she's giving me the tour, we walk by the office and it has a little plaque that says children's librarian on the door. And I said, "Oh, I'm so excited to meet her." Gender assumption that it would be a woman as a children's librarian. And she said, "You are the children's librarian." And I said, "I have never done this job before and I'm still in grad school." And she said, "Great." So my entrance into working in public libraries tracks to this day of don't assume people are going to really do the work for you. You have to figure it out for yourself. It is a learning environment, and people who expect others tend to be more frustrated or unsuccessful in the career. And I think that immediate lesson was I'm going to have to teach myself how to do this and figure it out for myself was also really important for my career in this field was building systems, building tools, proactively going and seeking help from others. Nobody in my field should ever be afraid to ask for help. Libraries are all about sharing. I just emailed somebody at Pierce Transit and was like, "Hey, I have some questions about these things." At the end of the day, being in libraries, if you are curious and unafraid to go out and ask for help or resources, then you're going to do really well. So I got to go from doing community theater and auditioning for cereal commercials or whatever to doing story times. loved doing story times and also did a lot of creative programs with kids. We were down the street from Project Housing. And so we had a lot of kids that would come in and just hang after school. And I used these writing boxes and then would do projects so that they could always come in after school and have access to markers and paper and all kinds of just basic stuff. But there was no boredom. They're like boredom boxes because I'd say, okay, go make me a map of the library, and they would go and make things with that. I got to do readers theater. That was so fun to do, where you take early reader books and then translate them into readers theater for kids. And that was something really fun to do. I had a lot of boys that wanted to learn knitting, and we would get chopsticks from the local Chinese takeout and then sharpen them up so that we could use chopsticks as knitting needles. And oh my gosh, it just was so fun. I think the biggest project connecting that kind of design thinking within the confines of a public library system with no resources was that we didn't have a space for teens in the building. And so my colleague and I redesigned the second floor despite not having any resources or support from the organization because there's no money for capital in public libraries in America. And so we did it really just ourselves with thinking about how to rearrange furniture, thinking about how people use the space and what their needs are. And it was so successful. We had huge increases in our circulation. We had so many people, more people using the library. And that was really fun to work on. And I actually saved a lot of those materials. We made like a little binder of that experience. This was in 2006, maybe 2006. And when I started there, we got floppy disks from the organization. We weren't even yet to thumb drives. Like at MIPO, so I still have the disk itself just because I wanted to save it. So we had like an internal campaign to upgrade from the plastic floppy disks to thumb drives during that time period. Yeah, you figure it out for yourself and get scrappy. Just like teachers, we're very much aligned with education in that schools are a formal learning environment. It's structured. For young people, it's required. But I really wanted my library to be like the fun aunt that the kids always loved to go hang out with, and all hopped up on sugar and then send them home. So my style of librarianship is the fun aunt.
I love that.
I still have my pigeon from Connecticut. When I worked in Connecticut, I had a friend that was working at Disney Publishing, and they published the Mo Willems books, and they gave me my pigeon.
Well, that's so sweet.
Somewhere there's a picture of me. I think it was in my library in Idaho. That was during National Library Week, maybe. Don't let the director drive the bus. And I was at the bookmobile, like pretending to drive. It's very funny.
I love that. I love that. And I love bookmobiles. I have very fond memories of a bookmobile coming and parking we lived in Fife Heights, which is a Tacoma address, but it's a hill above Fife. So yeah, the bookmobile. Was like the only thing we could walk to in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So how did you translate that fun aunt energy into leadership roles within library systems?
I would say by taking risks that most people don't feel comfortable taking. That I think also comes from having a background in the arts. Is experimentation is good, and government, people are less likely to take big risks. We're not always early adopters for things. And so I think I'm really grateful, actually, it was in Connecticut when I worked at the Darien Library, where it was celebrated to take risks. It was a culture. I think of it as almost like a lab or a think tank. At that time, we really embraced opportunities to innovate and do things differently. So with that human-centered design, user experience lens, we were doing a new building project. And so I was invited and encouraged to think differently about the children's collection there. And one of the things that always drove me crazy as a children's librarian was watching people struggle with picture book collection, because you look at a wall of these tiny spines, alphabetical, and you've got a 2-year-old who's like, I want truck books, and maybe a baby in a carrier that's crying. Like, how do you make sense of that? And it's really not empowering to the user the way that traditional collections are designed. And so in Connecticut, I was able to redesign the picture book collection and use color-coded systems so even pre-readers could navigate the collection by category. I mind mapped. I worked kind of tested out the way people would ask for help and then identify those patterns and create the umbrellas for the categories and then color coded accordingly. So we had 20,000 picture books, and then they were broken out into concepts, which were like ABCs, shapes, colors, books like that. We had things that go, transportation books, boats and trains and trucks and all of that. Animals, not animal characters, but books about the natural environment, categories like that. And then they all had their own colors. So a 3-year-old could come in and go. And I remember the day after we opened in our new building where I could hear people, the red books, Grandpa, the red books are over here. Those are the ones I like. So it was an empowering strategy for people to use the collection independently. And you still could search. You could still search a catalog, right? Like there's browsers and seekers in libraries. There's people who know what they want and they're searching for something specific. And then there's browsers who are just there and they take the book because the cover looks good. So that system ended up being adopted across the country, not here, but across the country. Many libraries now have some type of a system unique to their community. And that, I think our circ went up. We reached so many more users who felt like I can use this library now. It makes sense to me. Those kinds of things I was able to do in Connecticut that I don't know that I would have been able to do. I know I wouldn't have been able to do it near public library. Just it's too big of a system. And with that many parts, 80 whatever branches. And so being in a smaller library allowed me to really create and experiment a little bit. So another program that I did that I loved, so I created a Little Clickers preschool computer program, and we set it up the first day. We would always open up a computer, like an old tower. This was, a while ago, because I didn't want kids to think that computers were magic, that not to understand it. Of course, now, I have 2 smartphones sitting in front of me on my desk right now. The computational power is incredible. But at that time, basic things like how do you use a mouse? And how do you use a computer? So we created a curriculum and ran this program. It was so fun and loved doing that. And then, we just got to do a lot of fun things there that because it was that lab environment, we could share. And so others were able to learn from or replicate in their own libraries when someone else had done it first and kind of learned by your own failures. Like, I don't know, I'm not a cataloger, but nobody else really knew what we were doing. And so I ended up doing all the cataloging and the records management for this picture book reorganization. I made so many mistakes. At one point, I have a screenshot somewhere in my files of I had applied the changes to this record so many times that it had the coding, the call number repeated 16 times. So there's a lot of cleanup that needed to be done. But, it's not the end of the world. It's just a record. And it wasn't, a big deal. That, I think, was a privilege and an opportunity that not a lot of librarians get either, and to have that experience. And then I kind of took and built on that when I moved to Idaho and became a library director, where one of my favorite projects to work on was a tiny library. We took a shipping container and converted it into a little mini library, merging concepts from museum experience and focused on early learning in a library environment. So had a roll-up door so we could do story times out on this plaza. It was at a YMCA location. And so it was kind of like a bookmobile in some ways, 300 square feet, whatever it was, nice, tiny, literally tiny. And so even as a director, I was still able to focus on how powerful public libraries are in young people's lives. Public libraries are often the first experience they have with government, because we see children long before they go to school. And so I really think that's a very precious and important role that we play in civic life. And yeah, I still believe that to this day.
That's incredible. I had never thought of that way. Wow, thank you. So, outside of what's happening in the library, when you think about community, or it could be related to what's happening at the library system, what are you excited about that's happening right now?
In the field or in this system here in Pierce County?
Let's do both. We don't have a time limit. Tell me both.
I am excited about, in the field, in the profession of libraries, I'm excited about a trend to kind of refocus on core purpose. I think for 20 years or so, there's been a lot of generalizing in libraries. We're asked to fill a lot of social service gaps in communities without additional funding. And so I think we've broadened the scope of services and interests so much over a period of time. I see a lot of people really refocusing with the rapid adoption of AI to kind of coming back to information literacy as a core skill for the library and really getting back to our roots, so to speak, in what does it mean to be a literate person. And locally here, we're definitely talking about that, not ready to really be implementing anything major, but bringing that into our system conversations and the infrastructure we've been building. We've internally been working to make sure our internal systems make sense with core purpose, value, and our strategic goals in mind. And so that looks like, what are the core programs and services that the Pierce County Library should be delivering? No matter which branch you go to, you should expect that you're going to see early literacy support of a certain degree of quality that everyone deserves to have, no matter where you live in the county. Financial literacy and supporting the community and people's livelihoods. Financial literacy is really something that everyone needs support with. There's ways that we could be thinking about literacy as a core purpose and then nesting the other types of work that we might want to do or that our strategic plan calls us to do to make sure that everything fits in that. Because anything that doesn't fit in that, we just don't have the resources to do. And we're not going to duplicate what's already being done in the community. And we're not going to compete against private industry that might be doing something, whether you're profit or nonprofit. We can't afford to do that. And so I think getting really, really clear on purpose and focus is kind of job one right now, so that we can continue to be providing meaningful services to the community. We live in a time where the adoption of technology, the speed, the cost, the access has reached a tipping point where the digital divide was something that we care about. That term just reflecting that people who have technology or access and people who don't, for a while was really wide, because in order to buy a computer or to have high-speed internet, not everyone had that. That gap has narrowed in recent years, so much so that even people who are unhoused have smartphones, that people have access to devices and technology in much greater ways. What that looks like in the library is fewer people come in to use our public computers and more people come in to use our Wi-Fi, because it's free and it's high quality. So how might we think about our space design if that is the case, if we've seen this change in behavior and needs and community needs? So all of that, I'm a little bit of a tangent there, but just thinking about really getting clear. And then my hope is that brings the value that people really need to see in a government service, but also to motivate those of us working here and working in this space, because it's really hard. It's really hard to do work in public libraries today. And our staff are showing up every day despite some of those challenges. We live in a complicated time, and there are a lot of people who don't have means and resources, even if they have a smartphone, right? And so really need and deserve to feel that they're doing something with meaning to make it worth continuing to show up every day and to do a good job. So one more thought I would like to share on the technology piece. It's not specific to your question, but it's still connected to getting clear about our core work we should be doing, is around what does digital literacy look like today? Because we've seen in just a few years that even that has now proliferated in what it means to be literate. I'm thinking myself much more about how do we move even from literacy to competency when it comes to using digital tools. So, we think of in libraries, I think of digital literacy like a three-legged stool, where you have to have a device, you have to have access, but you also have to have skills in order to use those tools. And if you are absent one of those really key critical things, then you do not have a stool to sit on. And more with the speed of adoption, we're seeing the skills gap. So it's really not an access gap, but a skills gap. And if we embrace the idea that a public library is a part of the learning and educational ecosystem, albeit informal, then we have a real opportunity to lean into the skill development when it comes to technology in our communities. We can't do that until our staff are also really able to lean into educating in that new environment in an informal ecosystem. So that excites me actually as an opportunity, and I hope others are excited instead of afraid. I don't want to live my life afraid of things, right? And for some people, technology is scary, and it can be scary in the ways that we hear about people being taken advantage of. That's where that literacy piece comes in.
Absolutely. That's so powerful because that empowers the user to understand, right? And then from there,
Mhm.
figure out and harness it.
And you know this being in a tech company, but the algorithms are designed to keep your attention. The algorithms are designed to trigger your amygdala. You see it time and time and time and time again where something blows up online. We don't have that critical thinking happening. And
Mhm.
that is an information literacy skill as well.
Yes, definitely. Dopamine takes over.
Very easy. It's very easy to fall prey to that. Thinking really critically about that is a skill I work hard to practice myself and try to have conversations wherever I can about that with community.
So great. Well, I feel like a conversation with a librarian would be incomplete if I didn't ask you what you're reading right now.
I'm listening to the Beastie Boys book. It's available on the library's Libby, and it is so amazing because they have so many guest voices of people who are connected to the Beastie Boys. So it's really fun to listen to hear all these different actors and musicians and stuff. I'm going to finish this week the Project Hail Mary book because I want to see the movie, and I really liked his first book, The Martian. So I'm really enjoying that as well.
Great. Well, thank you. I'll have
What
to
are
get
you reading? Are you reading?
Gosh, I always am listening to something and reading something at the same time. So I'm listening to The New Era of Misogyny. It's a book about AI and how a lot of the systems that exist are being baked into the tool. Still terrifying, chapter one. And then I am reading The Second Chance Cinema, which is something I am totally, I don't know if you have like an impulse persona, but I am the person who will walk into a library and everything on the end cap is like what speaks to me. And my eyes are always bigger than my capacity to read. The Puyallup Library has this one marked as lost, but I'm going to finish it and return it and have access to my library account again. Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, you'll have to send me the title of the first one. That sounds juicy.
It's part of my own journey to be
Mhm.
literate and try to keep up. Things are changing so quickly,
Yeah.
and the thing I appreciate about the book is it doesn't pose the technology as the enemy or the bad thing, right? It's the humans behind it and what humans are doing with it. And so
Mhm.
understanding how these things work can then help us use them responsibly, but also use them for good.
Absolutely. And that's another thing I'm excited about is I think socially that people are really hungry for human connection. And whatever happens with AI, that's not a thing I can control, but I
Mhm.
can control how I show up with other humans. I can control as the leader of this organization how we want to prioritize human connection and how important that is to so many people in our community and will continue to be important no matter where AI goes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. You are somebody that I am so grateful that I had the opportunity to connect with. I mean, so much of our relationship was founded in person and has continued. You've been my minivan a handful of times, which is all it takes to be considered a friend in my book. I'm grateful for you and grateful to know you and grateful for all the work that you're doing in Pierce County and beyond.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for asking me and inviting me to participate. I enjoy working with you in my personal and professional life.
To bound. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, have a great afternoon, Jen.
You too.
Hello. How did your podcast go?
It went really well. Gretchen is so great. She
Yes.
is a librarian and the leader of the Pierce County Library System. And I know how much you love libraries. So I think you're going to love our
Love.
conversation.
Yes, I'm so excited. I am so excited about what Pierce County Library Systems is doing around here. Like, I swear libraries are going to change the world. So I can't wait to hear all about it. Gretchen is so lovely.
Yes, she is. And her path to leadership is really interesting and inspiring. And just a reminder that, we can learn all kinds of things from all different experiences. So I'm
Yeah.
excited for you to listen to it.
Yes, can't wait.
All righty. See you later.
Yeah.